Hello everyone, Amy here at School of Motion. Welcome to the final lesson in our cell animation in Photoshop series. This time we'll be working with the animation that Rich Nosworthy made for us. We'll actually be learning the ancient art of rotoscoping to get those octopus legs moving. I will be the first to admit that rotoscoping is not the most fun thing on earth to do, but it can save you from a ton of trial and error animating complex movement by hand, like waving tentacles. We'll also get into some finishing and compositing details in After Effects to really bring this animation together.
Make sure you sign up for a free student account if you want to grab the footage that Rich made for us to use in this lesson.
One last shout out to Wacom for their support and for making the Cintiq. You can do cell animation without it, but it's so much nicer with one. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started.
Welcome to Lesson 5, everyone. First, we're going to cover something that we didn't get to in the last lesson, importing footage to animate over in Photoshop. Some of you may have figured this out on your own, but we'll take a quick moment now to formally go over it. So we're going to go up here. We have the timeline panel already opened. We're going to click New Document Scene, and that's going to create a new 1920 by 1080 comp. Brings up our timeline frame rate, which we'll set to 24 frames per second, and hit OK. Now, the next thing we want to do is we're going to delete this initial layer that it made for us, and we're going to come up here to this little film strip. And this is where we're going to import our footage. So we're going to go to Add Media and navigate to where our footage is. All right, so now we have our proxy footage imported into Photoshop, and you see that it plays back just fine. We're at our full 24 frames per second. Now, the reason that we have to bring this in at a full 1920 by 1080 is because if you try and transform this, there's a chance that Photoshop will crash. You're going to want to repeat this process to bring in your clean plate, which is the footage that doesn't have the proxy on it. The clean plate is going to be used to give us a good idea of what our final animation will look like. Let's take one more quick look at that animation that I did over this footage that Rich Nosworthy gave us. You see we've got that splash going on in front of those tentacles. The way that I approached this animation was that I did all of the line work for the splash and got that looking good first, and then I came in and did some rotoscoping on those tentacles. So what is rotoscoping? The short answer is that it's tracing over footage, and as much work and tedium as it can be, it's also a major time saver. So let's check out how I approached the rotoscoping process in this animation. So let's get started with that rotoscoping now. Okay, so now that we're ready to add our color layers, the first thing we need to do is figure out which leg that is, because back in our style frame you notice that this leg is slightly darker. So I'm actually going to color pick that color really quick. And I'll come over here, and if you look, that back leg is the first one that gets revealed. So we are going to start off with that darker color. The other thing we want to do is we want to figure out exactly where that water starts to come in. So the water starts coming in on this frame, so this is where we're going to want to start our actual animation of this tentacle coming in. Now, there's no tentacle revealed yet, so we can go forward 2 frames, and this is the frame we're going to start on. So let's add our new video group and extend that by 1 frame here. We're going to be tracing over each of these octo legs here on 2 frame exposures, and we're just going to stay on 2s the whole time. Now, the other thing I want to mention really quick before we start drawing is that see where this water overlaps? Really what I want to draw on this is just going to be this portion that's below this water line. I don't even need to worry about working with any of this stuff that's covered up by the water. So just focus on these parts that are exposed as you're drawing. Alright, so all we're doing here is we're adding a 2 frame exposure. We're tracing around the edge of the tentacle where it's exposed, beyond that water line, and then we're going to use the magic wand, which is the W key, to select that inside area, and then just use that expand to fill action that we made in an earlier lesson, and using that to fill in this solid color. And all we're going to do is repeat that process over and over again, every 2 frames like this, until we get to the very end of this animation. Another thing that I want to mention is that I am taking into account exactly where those suckers are placed, and I am drawing just those little bumps there for the suckers, because later on I'll be filling in those details, and we want those suckers to be on the octopus tentacles to make them look more like an octopus. Otherwise, you just get these like flat, stringy, noodly things. So I'm adding those suckers in, and I'm trying to keep them as close as possible to where the actual proxy suckers are. There are going to be a few places, again, where I'm going to have to just kind of interpret them, but for the most part, they're in a close enough spot to where I can just follow this proxy guide for them. Now, if you look at this frame, something clearly went wrong with the model, so we're just going to kind of work around that and not worry about it too much and just fill this in and make it look correct. Don't forget to stop and save your work every once in a while before those sneaky computer gremlins cause Photoshop to crash. You can very easily lose a lot of work that way. So if you remember me talking about using artistic interpretation here, you can see that one frame where I didn't really like the curve of the tentacle. So I actually adapted that a bit more to my liking and just gave it a little more of a curve to it instead of it being quite as straight. So we've got one leg done, and now we need to do the other 4. I'm going to keep each leg in its own video group, and that's to make putting the outline on them much easier once we're done. Also, it will make adding shadows and highlights easier, and give us the ability to isolate and easily change any of the legs if we need to, like if we wanted to add a mid-tone to those base colors of the legs. So right here you can see me starting to change up this tentacle just a little bit. I'm giving it a bit more curve because I didn't like how flat it was getting. So again, you can stray away from that proxy, and I'm using still a lot of this to help me along with it, but I did make some changes here so that I got more of a curved feel and it felt a little bit more natural and the way that I wanted it to. Alright, and just like that, about 6 hours later, we have our tentacles moving. So it doesn't matter that the stuff at the bottom's jumping around like this. We can take care of that later on in After Effects using a mat, or we can even do it in Photoshop. So this I wouldn't be too concerned about right now. It's just making these tentacles up top look good. So this was a whole lot easier than trying to go in and actually draw them all by hand ourselves. So the next thing that I did was colorize that splash. Since I know that you watched the earlier lessons on how to do that using the expand fill action, we'll just forge ahead here and go straight to adding those outlines on the tentacles. I use that expand fill action on the outside of the legs to give them this nice dark outline that you're seeing. All you have to do is select the base coloring of the leg and run that action. The reason that I added the outline is because it helps to separate the legs from one another so that they don't look just like one giant pink blob. I also went in and drew in some of the line work where the tentacles curl at the ends that didn't automatically get an outline from running that action. I then gave those suckers some accenting to give them a bit more dimension, and then I moved on to adding shadows and highlights. Let's take a quick look at how to approach adding those in.
So we're going to take a really quick look here at how to add a highlight and a shadow layer to our octopus legs. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to make a new layer really quick, and this is where we're going to make a palette. So we're just going to color pick our base color, and then we're just going to come in and just get that base color drawn out over here. And now I want to make this shadow color that I have going around the leg, or for these little accents here. So what you can do is you can come in and just turn the brightness down a bit on this until you get the color that you want. So that's actually really close to where we were at with that, so we'll stick with it. And the other thing we're going to need is a highlight color now. And for the highlight color, we'll go back to this base color here. So I'm going to open up the actual little color palette window here, and I can see a little bit better when I'm dragging stuff around in here exactly where on this value scale it falls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a color that's kind of representative to like the light that's going on in the scene. So in this case, we have a lot of orange in that background, and it's somewhere in this value level. So I'm going to go back to my orange. Come here. And then you just kind of bring it across into more of like a whiter space there. So that we're a little bit more towards this bright side. You can just kind of tweak it. I know it's a little more orangey from the background. So we'll take that for our highlight color, and then we can just put that right up here. And now what we're going to do is actually add those layers in. So we need to make a new layer, obviously, and we need to figure out where our light source is coming from. So let's just say that our light source is coming down from this direction here, right? So what we're going to do is we'll start with that shadow really quick. And for the shadow, you're going to figure out which side of the leg is going to be, you know, on the dark side of this light. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to make it so that we can only draw on the actual octopus leg. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the magic wand tool. I'm going to select this pink base color here, which is on this layer. And we're just going to go back and make a new layer for our shadow. And we'll come in and select our color and then select our brush and just kind of start drawing where you think that this would be the dark side of the tentacle. So this takes actually quite a bit of practice to just figure out where the shadow is going to fall and where it's going to kind of start thinning out at the top here and stuff. And then, you know, if we want to bring it back in a little bit on the inside, like, do we want to put it there? So this is just like a bunch of practice and then trial and error, and you'll eventually kind of get a flow and a feel for exactly where things need to be. So now we're going to repeat the same type of setup for our highlight. And the highlight, you really don't need to make it quite as broad as you did with the shadow. Like, the shadow is pretty thick. The highlight's just an accent. So really you just kind of come in and give it a few little pieces. You don't need to make it quite as bold. So this is my workflow for adding highlights and shadows to something. And this is something that normally takes years to master, and it's not something that you're going to get right away. But at least now you have an idea of how to get started with this kind of workflow, so now you can give it a try.
So now that we've done all this hard work animating, let's actually get all of this footage out of Photoshop and bring it into After Effects to finish compositing it. So to do that, what we need to do is decide on what we want to render out. Now, I'm not going to get into too much detail here with all of this like highlights and shadows and all these sub-layers like this. I'm just going to take out these main chunks. I'm going to do the legs, this water first, the water second, and the little snap accent here. Now, when you actually render something out of Photoshop, you need to turn off everything that you don't want to render. So I'm getting rid of this background, the clean plate, and then we'll start with the legs. So we're going to turn off our water first, our water second, and our snap. This is actually a matte, so I'm leaving that turned on right now. So if we scrub through, we can see right away that we only have our legs on, and that's exactly what we want to render out. So now let's actually render these out. We're going to go up to this little menu here. We're going to hit render video. And I'm going to navigate to where I want to save this to. So I made a new folder for Lesson 5 output, and I'm going to name my file, and I'll just name it legs. And I'm going to throw an underscore on it. And I'm also going to create a new subfolder called legs. And this is because I'm going to be doing a Photoshop image sequence. And I'm going to be doing a PNG sequence because PNGs carry alpha and things like JPEGs don't. So use any preferred format that you have that has an alpha channel to render this stuff out. And then it will automatically number everything after that underscore now. And we want to keep our document size and our frame rate the same. And we're just going to go up to our work area. We want an alpha channel of straight unmatted. And that's all we need to do. And all you have to do now is hit render. And when this comes up, you want to do the smallest file size, and the interlacing is left to none. And when that's done, you will have one nice, tidy legs folder here with all of your images in it. So now we're just going to repeat that same process for our water second, our water first, and our snap. Now, I am rendering out the same amount of frames every time, even though a bunch of them will end up as black, because that will just make it much easier to line things up in After Effects once we're importing our footage. Alright, so now that we've got all that stuff out of Photoshop, let's bring it into After Effects and start compositing. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to bring in that clean plate. So let's import our file. And we will just drop that into a new comp like this. So now we will import all of our other layers. Make sure PNG sequence is checked off and it's importing as footage, and you just hit import. Now you're going to want to right click on this guy and go to interpret footage and then main. And what you want to do here is you want to make sure that After Effects is assuming the proper frame rate. Typically, it won't do that by default. So you're going to have to come in and just change this to 24 frames per second and hit OK. And now this footage, when we drop it in here, will actually be the proper length that we want. Now, the reason you're seeing a little bit of tail here is because we actually didn't animate the full length of the footage that Rich gave us. So this is correct. And let's just put this in order. And you can see here those other pieces of footage that I didn't interpret yet. They're much shorter. And the hotkey to get to interpret footage is going to be Control-Alt-G. And let's just play this back really quick and make sure that everything is in order. Alright, so now that we've got everything in order and placed in here, what we're going to do is we'll add a reflection first in this bottom part of the water. So to do that, we need to make a duplicate of our legs, so Control-D, and then you can just bump those up a couple layers. And you're going to want to make a copy of this water second here. Again, Control-D. And we're going to want the water second above the legs. And what you want to do here is we'll go up to a frame that's a little further along, and we're going to negative scale this so that we can get it on the ground here. So what you want to do is you want to uncheck the constrain here, and you want to just flip this to a negative value. So it's negative 100 in the Y. And then we will bring up our position and bring this down so it lines up nicely like that. Now, if you scrub through here, obviously there's no reflection yet, and you have all this pink stuff kind of poking up above here. So what we want to do is we want to alpha matte the legs to this second splash that we just duplicated. So let's turn that into an alpha matte. And now that we've done that, this looks a little bit better, like it's only showing up where we need it to on this end part here. Obviously, this doesn't quite look like a reflection yet, so we have a little bit more work to do with it. So let's add some effects to this to make it look a bit better. The first thing we'll do is we'll do the obvious and drop the opacity of it. So let's just turn that down quite a bit, and that helps a little. So now it's not quite as bold anymore, but it still needs a little something else. So let's come in and add a little bit of a blur to this. So we're going to use our fast blur. And just drop that on there and just give it a little bit of a blur. We don't need a whole lot here, just a touch. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is we'll add a little bit of a turbulent displace on this. And that will give it a nice texture. So let's drop our turbulent displace on. And again, we don't need a whole heck of a lot here. So let's just kind of play around with the amount and the size here to get it to where we want it to be. Right now, the size is really, really big. So let's turn it down so it's just a little bit ripply. Nothing too crazy. Somewhere probably around like a 9, 9.5. And then we'll just give it a little bit more to the amount here. So now this will have kind of a nice watery effect when the legs are just kind of swimming around in there. And the last thing we're going to do is we'll give it a little bit of a tint, and that will help integrate this into this footage a little bit better. Now for the tint, we can leave the black to black, but you're going to want to grab this map white 2 and select this color here. And now you can see it's got a completely different look to it. I think I will actually bump this a little bit more. All right, so now we have this nice reflection going on in the water down here, and we can actually change the transparency on this too, just to kind of, be able to see the floor a little bit through there and some of these legs going on. So that integrates it even a bit more into the footage. Actually, I'm going to turn this down just a touch more. There we go. Now, because we got rid of some of that transparency to this, the colors are not quite as vibrant as we want. So we're going to add a hue saturation effect here. And all we're going to do with this hue saturation is we're just going to bump this saturation up again. Just a little bit, so it looks more like our original color that we had. So if we go back now, you can see that looks a lot better than that kind of washed out color that we had. So that's how it was before, and now that is much nicer in those richer blues that we had before. All right, so now that we got this nice reflection going down here in the water, let's move on and actually add a shadow kind of over here from these legs to make them just a little bit more integrated into our scene. So to make that shadow, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we are going to grab these legs and we're going to duplicate them. Now, obviously, a shadow is not going to be the same color as the legs. So what you're going to want to do is go over to your effects and grab a fill effect. And we can just drop that fill right on top there. And then you're going to want to pick a color from one of these darker regions, probably off of the robot or someplace like that, so that you still get a nice tint to the shadow so that it matches the coloring in the scene. So now that we've got that done, we need to get this shadow to lay on the ground. So we're actually going to use an effect called CC Slant. And what we're going to do with the CC Slant is we're going to actually just kind of tilt this over a little bit till we get it to roughly where we would want it to be on the ground. And then you're going to grab this height and you're going to smush this guy down kind of somewhere down here. And obviously that's way out of place. So we're going to grab this floor and we're going to move it up in the Y direction until we get this so that it's laying on the ground where we want it to be. And we can kind of mess around with these values to get them to look right. Just tweak things a bit. And that's looking pretty close. So probably right around there is where we want this to be so that it looks like it's on the floor. And now that we've got that on the floor, obviously shadows aren't really sharp like this, right? So we're going to go in and we're going to grab a fast blur. And we'll drop our fast blur on there. And all we have to do is just crank this up a little bit. We don't want it super blurry, just enough so that it softens that edge there. And that's looking much more shadow-like. And we can actually turn down the opacity a little bit on this. There we go. So that's looking like a nice shadow. But we have all this kind of weird crawly stuff over here. So what we need to do is create a matte to knock this stuff out. So what we're going to do is make a new solid, Command Y. And I always leave my solids some obnoxious color when I'm doing a matte. And I'm just going to drop my opacity down so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to grab my pen tool, which is G in After Effects, and then we will just draw a mask onto our matte here. And there we go. But we need to invert our mask, because what's going to happen when we use an alpha matte is it's going to show up wherever the solid is. So let's invert that really quick. And then we're also going to add a feather to this just to soften the edge, because otherwise we're going to get this hard line where it transitions between where this mask is and is not. So let's just feather this really quick. So now you can see we've got a nice soft edge along that border, and we can crank our opacity up, and that soft edge is really obvious now. And then we just grab our legs that are for our shadow and we will alpha matte this. So now we have all of that stuff that was kind of over here is pretty much gone. There's just a tiny bit there, but it's not bothersome. And this is looking pretty good. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're just going to add a nice simple light wrap on here to give this a bit of a glow and get it to really integrate into this scene. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to duplicate this background, because this is what we need to pull our color from. And I'm just going to kind of pop it up here in the middle so you guys can really see what's going on here. And what we want to do with this is we're going to use something called a set matte to do this. Now, if you want to know more about the set matte effect, you can check out our 30 days of After Effects tutorial called Tracking and Keying Part 2, where Joey gets a little bit more in depth to the mechanics of what's going on here with this set matte effect. But I'm just going to show you really quickly how to do this. So we're going to type in set matte, and we're going to grab that effect, and we are going to drop it onto our duplicated footage. Now, what we want to do is we're going to pick one of the layers with the legs on it. In this case, I will pick my shadow layer. Now, you can see there's just a little bit of an outline going on here. And this is correct. Even though we put those effects, like the CC slant and the blur, onto that layer, set matte ignores all transforms and any effects that you've put onto a layer that you're pulling the alpha data from. So what you're seeing here is completely correct. Now, what we're going to do is actually invert this matte, because right now we need these legs to be showing up. So the next thing we'll do is we're going to grab our fast blur again, and we're going to drop that right here into the stack. And we're just going to blur this. And if you notice, this background is getting blurry too, and that's okay. But you can see, if we zoom in here, we're getting this nice glow on the edge of the legs there. There it is without it. And there's that glow on the edge. So this nice light wrap effect. So what we're going to do now to cut out this background again is we're going to grab another set matte. We can actually just duplicate our original and then drop it to the bottom of the stack. And then we're just going to uncheck this invert matte button. And right there, our background is right where we need it to be again. But we have this nice light wrap effect and this nice glow to the legs. And it really just pulls those legs into the footage even more. All right, and there you have it. We've done some really quick stuff that was very easy to achieve in After Effects to really just add those finishing touches to this animation.
That's it. You've made it to the end of our cell animation in Photoshop series. I hope you enjoyed this series and learned a bunch of stuff to get you started with traditional animation. I also hope that you had a lot of fun doing these lessons. I know I did. If you liked this series, please spread the word and share it with people. Thanks to Wacom, Rich Nosworthy, and thanks again to you for watching. I'll see you next time.